And I'll go ahead and pause here for a moment so you can scan the QR code if you need to. This is where you can find us on all of our social media channels and our Slack channel. I'll pause here for just a moment. And hopefully you can get dialed in with all of those great links to stay involved once the session ends. Okay. And with that, I'll go ahead and switch over and give the floor to Astha.
Thanks, Lindsay. Me share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Cool. 1 second. Sorry. Hey everyone, welcome to session 3 of the SQL series. I'm so excited to have you all here today. Some housekeeping things as a reminder. We have our amazing team here. They'll answer your questions as we go. There's a Q&A box. You can put it there. There's a Slack channel, which Lindsay already talked about. So you don't have to wait till the end of the session to ask your questions. And recording will also be available later, just as a reminder, in case you want to like revisit anything. So with that, in the last session, Lindsay gave us an amazing overview and then went deep into it with examples of the syntax, operators, conditional logic, basic SQL commands like select, where, between, not, etc. So today we will progress to intermediate level of SQL, which will build on top of these concepts. But before we move ahead, do you remember the stretch exercise that we did in the end to order things? Which command were we using? You can type it in the chat if you'd like. Just want to like, that's where we'll start off of. So just want to get an idea if folks remember.
Yeah, I'm seeing some good answers here. I think we have a lot of people that remember.
Nice. Okay, cool. So I'll go over some new commands today and we'll build on this syntax and then we'll move over to the practice session. The idea is to like be as hands-on as possible. So order by, this was the command that we ended at last time. We use order by to order the values of a column. By default, the ordering is in ascending, although you can type ASC if you want. And then if you want the ordering to be descending, you should specify the command DESC. And if you remember from Lindsay's session last week, someone asked a really nice question. If default sorting is ascending, should we specify ASC or not? Which is the better practice? Does anyone remember? Would you like use ASC or not if given a choice? What's the better practice you would follow? You can type it in the chat box.
Yes, lots of people agreeing to use ASC.
Good, awesome. So in this slide, as you can see on the image on the left, the first name is ordered in ascending, last name's in descending. Next, count, as the name suggests, counts the values based on the conditions you specify. For example, in this image, if I ask SQL to count the total values or the total rows that are populated here, I get the answer 4. But if I ask for count distinct, I get the result as 3 because dog is populated twice. So it gives me the result 3, which is what I would want. Now, let's look at some aggregating measures. So you have a table here which lists all the orders placed in your store. You have an order ID, which is a unique identifier per order. You have an item, which tells you which item was sold. So whether it was keyboard, mouse, monitor, and so on. The amount, which tells you how much the customers paid, and then a customer ID, which is not unique because a customer can have multiple orders. And you want to see the total amount of money you've made. So the total amount that all of your customers have paid for all of your orders. So how you would do that is you would use the sum function, So how I would read, like when you break down these queries, we just like select from the tables, the orders table here, and then you aggregate to whatever you want. So since you want the total amount, you would use the sum function for that. And just notice here, I put an as total sales. That is just so that the column here names it as total sales, and it's not like a weird function that you've mentioned. Here you have a customers table. So here the customer ID is unique, unlike the previous table where order ID was what was unique. And then per customer, you have their first name, last name, age, and country. You want to find the average age of your customer base. This is one of the very important features that you would see in any business. If you want to know about your customers, this can be like one of the important features for that. How you would go about it is kind of a similar pattern. Look at select from the table name, and then what aggregation you want is you want the average age of your customer. So you would average over this column, and that gives you the average age. In the same customers table that we were seeing, you now say want to find the age of your youngest customer. So in that case, min is the function we use. Again, it's like select from the table name and then whatever aggregation function you're using. And notice here, I did not use the as alias. So this gives you like a min age here. And this is just like one function value, but you can have like complex things and then the headers just become weirder and weirder. So it's always nice to add an alias when you're using these. In the same customers table, now you want to say, see the age of your oldest customer. Exact same thing. Instead of min, it becomes max here. Now let's turn up the intensity a little and start looking at how we can group by categories and then aggregate within those categories. So let's look at the customer table again. You want to know how many customers do we have for each country. So you're going to look at the customers table. We're doing something with the country. And then within each country, we want to see how many customers exist. So how that goes is you select from the table name, group by the country, because we want to see something per country. So the grouping will be on the country column. And then what's the aggregate? You want to see the total number of customers per country. So that's why there's a count here. Let's try one more, but this time with the orders table. So say we want to see how much amount has each customer spent. In this case, it would be exactly the same thing. The table changes to orders, group by is again per customer ID, and then you want to see the total amount per customer. So the sum amount is the aggregation that you're using. So we were seeing aggregations before with min, max, sum, average. With group by, it's nothing but you're doing it within each category. Having is one step up. So it's nothing but a where on an aggregated column. So here you have a table of customers. The question is, from which countries do we have more than one customer? What do I need to have in my data for this? What I need basically as a first step is I want to have one row, which gives me the country, and then a corresponding number of customers from that country. And then I can like do whatever filters I want in terms of how many number of customers fall between this and this or whatever. But the first thing I want is country and how many customers do I have for that country. So this is something we already did here, right? We were seeing how many customers do we have for each country. So how you would get here is you would do the exact same thing. Ignore the having for now. You got select from customers, you grouped by country, and then you're looking at count of customers per country. This is what you get. Having is basically you're filtering out the customers who had the countries who had less than less than two customers. So anything greater than one. So basically you get UK and USA, and you can like compare it to your last result. This was the result you got with every country and the customers per country. And then now I want every country that has customers greater than one. So that's basically what having does. It's like a where but after group by. So anytime you put a filtering condition on an aggregated column, that is this, any aggregation that you've done, after group by, you'll be using having. And this is a very important interview question as well. In a lot of interviews, you will be asked, what is the difference between where and having? So very, very key concept here. Yeah, so that's it. Where clause applied to all rows, having applied to groups and aggregations after the group by clause. And then if you're interested in like thinking of like, we're like building on top of it, right? Like we start from select star from, then we add where, then we add group by, we add having, we have order by limit, we have so many things. How does SQL know where to start? So what the order of execution goes is there are multiple tables in your database. And so when you give this command to SQL, it's going to go into that database and first select the table out of the hundreds of tables that exist, which is the table I want to look at. So from is the first thing that's executed. Then you go to where, because you're like filtering out certain rows. If that table has say 100 rows, I want to look at only 20 rows, where condition would do that. So you go from, next thing executed is where, you have a subset now. And then you do the group by, the aggregation. So group by and having is executed after, and then at the end is order by. And this is the last one for today, and then we're going to go into the hands-on. This is case. Case is like if else, if you've done a coding language before, but if not, basically we give one or more conditions and pass each value through those conditions to see where the value fits. If I have say 2 conditions, I can say if it meets the first condition, perform this action. If not, check for the second condition. If it meets the second condition, perform this action. If it meets none of the 2 conditions, then I give a default action to perform. And that's essentially what case does. You're checking for conditions sequentially, and you stop the moment you meet any condition. Otherwise, you go to the default action. So let us see this in practice. You have a customers table here. What I want is if the country column has the value USA, change that to United States of America. That's my condition 1. If the country column says UK, change that to United Kingdom. That's my condition 2. And otherwise, for any other country, if it's not USA or UK, I want it to be populated as unknown country. That's my default condition. So how this code would look like is you would select, ignore everything from the customers table. Now, what I want to display is a customer ID and the first name. I do that, customer ID, first name. And this is the chunk where you do your case statement. So case, very simple, like how you would talk. When country is this, then make it United States of America. When it's UK, make it United Kingdom, else unknown country. And so this column right here changes to this as an output. Okay. So yeah, so these are all the conditions you want to talk about: the min, max, aggregations, group by, aggregations within group by, having, which is like filtering after grouping, and then case. And you can like join the Slack channel. Lindsay's already mentioned this before. We'll be posting more discussions, questions there. You can like discuss amongst yourselves as well. A very nice resource to continue learning. But if, yeah. And then like we can go to this link and start the hands-on exercise. I think you would be shared a doc in the chat, which will have the questions that we will be looking at today. So this is the same exact portal that we used last time. If you remember, click on SQL Database, you can see all the tables that exist within the database. Ignore the ads that are on the left side. When we're running commands, you want to select whatever you want to run and then run selection. So you do a select star from patients that gives you the table here. Okay, so let me post the first question. Show the first name of our patients in alphabetical order. So question gives an idea that we want to order by. So let's see, we're looking at the patients table. So select, I'm gonna leave a gap there from patients. Now what I want to see, it says select first names. So there is a column called first name. Gonna populate that. And now it's asking us to order. So what's the command that we would use here? You can type on the chat. Anyone remember?
We have some guesses of order by
Great.
ASC.
Great. So yes, that's order by, and then you're doing the first name, and then you're doing the ASC. That should give you the result. There we go. We have some similar names, but it's doing its job. Okay. The second one, let me put the second question. So this time we're looking at the doctors table, which is this one. It has doctor ID, first name, last name, specialty. And I want to see the total number of doctors that we have in this hospital. So I'm going to go with the exact same thing. Select from, we know the table, that's doctors. What's the command that we would give here? Any guesses on the chat?
Yes, we have lots of count.
Good, awesome. That's amazing. Yep, count. And if I do this and run, I get 27, but see the column name, it says count star. I don't want that. So I'm just gonna alias that as total doctors. And let's see if that's more beautiful. There we go. Awesome. So let's see, how about you all try this one? You can paste the answer in the chat, the entire thing, or you can put it on the Slack channel, either way. And let's see what the query is. I'm just gonna do a select star from specialty doctors.
Sorry, Astha, we have a question. This is a recurring question. Could we have used the count on doctor ID instead of star? And there was a question in the chat also that what is the difference between star and using a column name instead?
Yeah, so basically star is gonna do nothing but give you the count of the rows. So since we wanted the total number of doctors, you can just do a count and count star, and you will get the number of rows. Where you will see a distinction, you could have used doctor ID, it would give you the same exact result. Where you will see a difference will be in this question. So I'll show you how those two are different in the answer of this question. So let's go here. If you're looking at the total number of specialties, right? Let me just open this. So you see like there are multiple specialties, but we have like multiple pediatricians and like neurologists. So we just want the count of distinct specialty. And so that's the case where instead of doing a count star, we would put a distinct here and specialty, and that's what we would want without duplicate. So if I do a count star, that's essentially just going to give me the number of rows. But since the ID is unique, it would have given you the exact same result. So let's see, you get 15, but if you look at this, there were 27 rows. So you can like manipulate counts inside, and like as you start getting into more complex SQL, you can start like putting complex functions in there as well. So yeah, let's look at the next one. I want to see the average weight of all patients. So we start with a select always from, which is the table? Any guesses? You can put it in the chat.
We see a guess for patients. Many
Awesome.
guesses for patients.
Awesome. Okay, now I want to see the average weight of all the patients. What function am I going to use here? Whatever I'm going to do to the weight column. And if you're like, if you want to like see what's going on, you can like click here, see what all columns are existing. You see a weight column. So I want to do something on the weight. I want to find an average. What's the function I'm going to use here? Any guesses?
Average, lots for average. Average weight.
That is right. So we can run this and get the average. What if, okay, this is the last one we're doing on functions, and then we're going to move on to grouping and a little more complex things, but this is the last one. What is the height of our tallest patient? So select from, I'm going to go with patients table. There is a height column here, so that's what I'm going to put here. What would be the function you would use to get the tallest patient?
We've been seeing lots of guesses for max.
Awesome. That is right. Okay, so run this. 226. Amazing. So I think by the guesses and the answers from everyone, we're ready to tackle a little more complex problems. Let me get rid of the stuff here. And I'm going to paste this question and see what you all think. Let me add it. Okay. So I want to see the city and the total number of patients in that city. So remember categorizing and the aggregation within that category. Once I'm done with that, I want to order from most to least patients, and then by city name in ascending. So here's a curveball where I'm asking you to order 2 things instead of 1. And let's see, I'll start, see if you guys can help me. So since we are going for city and total number of patients within the city, the table I'm going to use is patients. So let's put the first things first there. Now, what I want to look at is city and the total number of patients. So the first column's city, that's fine. What will be the second here? I want to see the total number of patients within that city. So what function would go here? Any ideas?
Many answers for count.
Yep, that's right. And so we do a count on, we want to look at patients. So I'm going to go with patient ID here. This is what we were talking about before. And I'm going to aliases because I don't want the ugly function name in my results. Okay, so I get a city, I got to get a count of patient ID, but I haven't created the grouping of categories yet. So what would my function here be?
few answers for group by city.
Yep, that is right. So we group by city. So we group by city, count of patient. Since we group by city, we'll get it within each city, the count of patients. And the second part of the question says order from most to least patients. That is this total patients. But with city, I want to name it ascending. So total patients, I want to order descending, and city, I want to name ascending. So we know order by now, so I'm not gonna quiz you on that. But how do you think you would represent ordering of two columns, one descending and one ascending? You can take any guesses in the chat, any answers fine. I know this is a little bit of curveball, but just go with your gut here.
We are getting a few answers to use and for between descending and ascending.
Okay, that's actually a good guess, but whoever designs SQL, how they design it is, I want to order total patients, and I want to order city. So what we use instead of and would be a comma, and the total patients I want to order from most to least. So that's descending. So I can put a DESC here. And the city I want to order is ascending. So I'm going to put an ASC here. And this should give you the result. So you would get city names and then total patients.
Astha, we have a question. So is there a preference between using count star and count patient ID for this question, for example? Like, can you explain the context of this question?
I would say as explicit as you can be. So count star is something that you would use like to do quick things, but I would say wherever you can be explicit, put IDs. Another thing that you might see in some places is you might see group by, instead of city, people putting like one. So one just means whatever the first column is next to select. And if you're grouping by multiple things, you would do 1, 2, 3. And that's also something you would do like when you're doing ad hoc stuff. But when you're putting code in production, and like when there are multiple people collaborating with your code, being explicit is what helps. Especially like it helps with not creating unnecessary confusion.
There is another good question. Could and have been used instead of the comma between total patients descending, comma, city ascending?
No. It's with order by, it's always a comma. That's just the syntax. When you're using multiple conditions, for example, in where, when I'm giving like conditions where this column equals this and this column less than this, that is where we use and. So with where we use and, with order by, if we want multiple things, we use a comma. Okay, so this is great. We're at the last 2 questions for the day. So let me paste that here. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to see the province IDs, sum of height, where the total sum of its patient's height is greater than or equal to 7,000. Okay. Again, it's the patient's table. So select from patients. And what would you group by here? Because there is a sum of height, there is a province ID, total sum of patients is greater than or equal to 7,000. What would you group by here? Any
People are
guesses?
saying province ID.
That is right. So that would be province ID. And then I'm asking to show province ID and then sum of height. So as it says, this is the best thing about SQL, as it says in the code. I want province ID and then I want sum. So that's the sum function, height, as total height, because I don't want that ugly function in my result. Now, this gives me, for each province, this gives me the height of all the people in that province. But I want those provinces where the total height sum is greater than 7,000. So what would go here?
The mixed bag of answers. We have some saying where, some saying having.
Okay, so let's revisit this, because this is a very, very important concept with where and having. So there's the table patients, right? If I want to filter anything at a patient level, I say I want to filter province ID. I want to see only provinces, say 1, 2, and 3. That is when I use where. So that is like something that was existing in this table as is, and I'm just like filtering on that column. But since it's saying where the total sum of its patient's height is greater, so you're filtering on an aggregation that you performed on an existing table. And now I'm filtering on this total height. So every time you do that, anytime you do a filtering after the group by, it would always be having. And this would be an exact question where an interviewer might be like, okay, where would you use where or having here? So anything after from, you would filter on where. Anything after group by, you would filter on having. And since this is tricky and so interview prone, I feel like in the Slack channel, we can like send out practice questions, which are like more of these trick things, which the interviewers trick you with, and get some more practice. So where and having, very, very important thing. And I think we'll do some more fun exercises around it in the Slack channel. So make sure to join it if you haven't already. Okay, this is great. Last question of the day. And this is something we haven't done in our hands-on part so far. So let's see if you guys can get this. We want to see the first name, last name, and gender in a way that whenever gender is F, it is shown as female, right? So it's not mentioned on the question here, but it is from the patients column. So let me just display patients here and show you what I'm asking for. So if we look at patients, you see the gender column, right? So every time it's M, it's fine. I don't care. But every time it's F, I want it to be displayed as female. So remember, the US turned to United States of America and so on. So I want to make a change in this gender column. Okay, so select from patients, and I want to display the first name and the last name. So I'm gonna, instead of star, I'm just gonna filter there, first name, last name. Okay, now what command would come here? Any guesses? You can put on the chat.
Yes, I see plenty of case answers.
Yay. That is it. Okay, so case. What comes after case? I want to do like, if this condition is true, then this. What comes after case?
We have a question also. Wouldn't it be greater than equal to 7,000?
Patient size is greater than, yes, that is correct. It is greater than equal to. See, you guys are doing awesome. Okay, back to this. What comes after case? Any guesses?
Yes, many wins. When.
Yay, that is amazing. Yes. So case when. Now, what is the column I'm playing around with this case statement on? Which column's name do I want to put here? That's the column I want to make changes on.
Gender.
Yes, that is it. So rest comes from this question. Wherever gender is F, I want to do a female. So gender equals F. It's the condition. Then I want to change it to female. So what comes after when? It rhymes with when. Any guesses?
Yes, then.
Yay. Then, so if it's F, then I want to change it to female. Else, I don't want to do anything. I want it to be as is. A little trick question, but what do you think would come here?
There's a lot of different responses to that. I think everyone's guessing at this point.
Yeah, it is tricky. Sorry. So generally you would like give a default when M equals like stay as M or something, but you can like just give gender and it'll not do anything. It'll just take whatever. So when it's F, it'll do female. Otherwise, it'll just pick whatever value there is, and then it'll put it as is. And then if what's going to happen now, let me just show you actually. Oops. Oh, there is an end, which I missed. Okay, so every case statement has to end with an end. But you see what happens, like what I was talking about, when your functions get a little more ugly and long, the column name's just going to be this, which does not look good. But it's doing its job. It's changing F to female. It's leaving M as M. I'm just
We have two questions regarding this particular query. First is, can we leave out the else statement, which like two people have asked, is the else statement required? And second, how do we know that the case statement comes before the from patients clause?
Okay, so let's see the first one, which is what you were saying. What will happen if I ignore the else? Let's run it and see what happens. This is what happens. So what it's doing was it'll take every value and run it through this condition. So if you don't have a default, it does not know what to do, what to put in this new column. And so all of those values would be nullified. That's what happens. And the second question was why case before from? That's because that is the same with everywhere. So if you look at any SQL syntax here, anything you're doing to the columns, be it like sum of height, like, so that's aggregation, be it a case statement, anything that you're doing to the columns. So select everything you do to the columns from this table, and then you do the group by, having, order by, limit, all of those things. But since you're like manipulating the column, that's why you would, or the values of the column, and that's how you want it to be displayed, it's going to come from patient. So this is like a logic that you would think of from the perspective of, you know, writing your code. But think of it from the perspective of like what I was saying, when, what is the order in which things will be executed. So generally it's like from patient. So it's going to look at like, okay, there are all these tables in the database. I'm going to pick from patients. Now what next thing, what do I want to do? I want to do stuff on columns. So that's the part that you put here. So it's just like a structural idea that you put in your head when you're like trying to design these queries. So that's why there's half of the answers is like syntax is that way. Yeah.
Sorry, there was one question in the chat that I think got kind of glossed over a little bit, but the question was, why wouldn't you include gender in the select line as well?
Oh, I can show you what happens. So again, let's see what happens when we include gender and then this. Run. Okay, so you see what happens? Gender is one column, and then everything you did to gender is another column. Now, you could want both of them to be displayed depending on your use case scenario, but typically I would want, like, if I'm like wanting things to be displayed as one column having data, say females and males, then I don't want another column to have the same data. It's like redundant data that you're displaying as your result, right? It's not giving you any information. So essentially, this is what's happening if you include the gender column. It'll include it as is here, and then this is the one that you manipulated. Okay, so going back to making this ugly little name a little cleaner. After end, I can put the as for my alias, and then I'm going to call it gender new. And then just run it, and there you go. So for female, for F, it'll change to female. And since we had an else statement, the other things it's going to put as is. If we did not, it would just put it as null, which we already saw. So, yep, there you go. That's all the hands-on for today. I'm really excited, like with all the answers and these amazing questions and being able to see it practically of like, hey, what'll happen if I change this? And like, feel free to do it by yourself. Like when you're practicing on this portal, just feel free to be like, why can't I do this? Or why can't I make this like this? Like it's the best way to learn, honestly, when you see like, oh, what is it doing when I change things a little bit?
There is one question. Could you have two when statements, one for female and one for male, instead of having a when and an else statement?
Yeah, you can do that. And again, I would encourage you to test it out. You can do that. Okay, any other questions?
We still have 10 minutes for a Q&A. So if anyone has a question, they can post it in the Q&A box. There's a question saying, do we call the new column gender new, or can we call it gender, and should actually we call it gender or not?
Oh, you can call it anything. You can actually rename it to its original name as well. You can like just call it anything. The objective of doing that is just to not have that ugly little function out there, but you can like name it whatever you wish to.
A person is getting a syntax error. Astha, if you could please check the query in the Q&A box instead of me reading it out.
Yep.
In question.
Let's see. Let me open the Q&A box. Okay, there is a comma missing after your last name. Try that. So after every column's name, you would have a comma, except for the one right before from. So like you see first name, last name. And after I do a gender new, I don't have a comma. That's the one right before from.
Do we have to call the new column gender new, or can we call it gender?
You can call it gender. You can call it whatever you like.
Perfect. There's a question about what we're covering on the next session. If anyone knows that.
Next session is Intermediate 2. We will cover joins. So inner, outer, left, right. So right now you've been like interacting with just one table and doing things on that one table. Next session, you will be able to join different tables and then do all of this with the joint results. So things are getting exciting next session.
Can the case command be used in the where condition?
Case command can be used in the where. No, I mean, like, why you have to see like why you're doing the case, right? You're, like I said, you do a from, you get the table, and then with case you manipulate a column. And so you would put it before from, and then in where you can like put conditions on that new column.
Thank you. We have another question about case and switch. They thought that was very similar, but switch wasn't mentioned tonight. And there's a question mark to that. So maybe is that something that relates that will be covered, do you think?
Switch. No, I don't think we have it in our series. Right, Mansi? Do we have
I
it?
wasn't thinking so.
No, no, we don't. I'm not sure about this one, but the code on the sqlpractice.com stays after we close the tab, or it goes away?
No, it'll go away.
Yeah.
It'll just stay while you're on it. So I'd encourage you to like copy it, paste it in a doc or something.
There's a question that I'm going to answer to follow along with the YouTube video. Are there any files that are posted on the same page? Yes. In the YouTube description also, we'll post the link to our GitHub channel, which will have the GitHub repository, which will have all the slides and the answer keys that Astha has used in this session and Lindsay has used in the previous session. And the GitHub link will also be shared on our Slack in the SQL Coding series channel. I encourage you to join that channel because if you practice and midway you get a doubt, it's not just limited to this session. You can ask any SQL doubt on that channel and we'll try to help you.
I believe we already addressed this question, but it's once more in here just to make sure we got it covered. Why do we put the comma before the case statement?
Oh, that is because you just had one column that was listed before the case statement. If you had no column, say you were just displaying one column that was about case manipulating another column and your output is just one column, then you would not have a comma. So comma has nothing to do with case or any of the functions that we discussed. It is just like column A, comma, column B, comma, column C, like just separating those out.
And I believe our last question is being answered right now about additional practice questions and practice exercises. Actually, I don't know if you want to show, but in the platform, there's a bunch of questions you can actually pursue yourself with the same data set.
Yeah. Let me actually show you. So over here, we were putting our own questions, but if you go to the same platform and do view all questions, you can actually select the difficulty, easy, medium, hard. You can actually select it by what concept you want to practice on. And then once you complete using this way, you can actually also see the questions you've completed and the incomplete ones. So it's a pretty nice way.
Thanks for demoing that.
Sorry to interrupt. I think everyone's just asking for the Slack link again. I'm just sending that in the chat. So yeah.
And once you join Slack, you can join the SQL Coding series channel that we've been talking about. We will also post the GitHub repository link there.
Okay, if there are no further questions, we'll go ahead and move on with the rest of our day or evening. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you, Astha, so much for your guidance and your instruction. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed this myself.
Thank you. I'm excited for the next session. See you all there.
Likewise.
Yeah, Leanne, we will post the slides. We'll upload the slides to the GitHub repository, and we'll also share the link in our Slack. So you would not have to pause the YouTube video. I can understand that. So we'll post the video links, slide links as well.
I hope we see everyone at the next session.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.